Greetings, Fred in Alaska. Thanks for joining me today. What I wanted to share with you comes from the Yukon River approximately 30 years ago. I want to thank the elders and the younger folks that found my channel and encourage their elders to come forward and share some of these experiences. Like I've said it plenty of times, I do this for public safety, for public awareness, for people going out into the wilds, and maybe you'll hear something in one of these, encounter videos that you may run into, weird owl hoot, whatever, chirps, whistles, all that kind of thing. So anyway, I want to thank those younger folks for bringing the elders in to share some of their experiences. So this occurred, these elders were leaving Galena, heading upriver. They were going up for some caribou hunting, and they had picked up some other relatives from Galena. So none of them are from Galena, except for one of the people that was part of this little hunting party. The rest, we'll just leave it at that. So what was shared with me was there was 5 people on this hunting party, and all of them experienced this. Only one's willing to talk about it. So I only have the one person's perspective. So that's what I'm sharing here. So her name, we'll call her Judy. Okay. So Judy, this being 30 years ago, she wasn't an elder yet, right? But she was with a couple other elders and her husband at the time and his brother, and they're going up to hunt for caribou. And there's a particular slough north of Galena where they would like to park and then hike back in past the tree line and stuff over this one rise, this one butte, get onto the backside, and usually there's some caribou hanging out in there. And so that's what they were heading out to do, and also pick berries at the same time. So from Judy's point of view, she was the last one in the line. She was carrying her husband's rifle. One of his rifles, while he had another rifle, and he was kind of leading the group because it was his favorite hunting area, and everyone was just kind of like, hey, we'll follow you, whatever. They get to a portion of the trail just past the tree line where it opens up onto some tundra, and someone noticed some salmon berries. So automatically everyone's stopping, right? Them natives ain't going to pass up fresh ripe salmon berries right there, all over it, right? So they're doing their thing, and they get out some baggies and stuff, anything extra they had in their pockets that they can empty and put berries in, And so as they're doing their thing, Judy said that her husband was keeping watch, and he was, about 25 feet away, and he kept looking over his left shoulder, kept looking over his left shoulder, and would turn around, and he had a scope on his rifle, so he would scope the tree line. He's doing all these weird things, and it was her husband. She could read that something was off, but he wasn't saying anything, so she assumed he was just unsure but got a bad feeling. And so she started paying attention, and she started getting a creepy feeling. Well, soon enough, the other 3 people in the party also started getting creepy feeling, that everyone's little intuition radars went up and heads started peeking up, looking around, because they were all jovial in a small little group, picking these salmon berries, talking about the last time they found a good batch of berries like that, right? So Judy said her husband glances over at her and kind of does this motion with his head like, come here, and so she walks past the group because she was on the opposite side of them, and they're about 25 feet from the tree line, and from where her husband was standing 25 feet away, he was a little further from the tree line because it was a little bit offset from the way the natural tree line ran. She said when she got up to her husband, he points and is looking at her, but he's going, look over my shoulder, back over in them trees. Do you see something brown back there moving? And so Judy's looking over it would be his right shoulder, and she notices immediately something brown peeking out from, you got all this black spruce and stuff, right? And so this brown color, which was like a rusty brown, stood out. I mean, it stood out brightly compared to the backdrop, right? So she see this thing moving out a couple times, and she goes, yeah, I see that. What is that? And he goes, I don't know. It keeps peeking. And then the word hairy man was coming out of her husband's mouth as this thing whooped at them. Immediately, everyone, the three that were squatted down picking the berries, immediately they stood up and they're all looking that direction. And this thing they knew right where it was because all eyes were, fixed into that area. Judy said her husband, when he had turned around because of the whoop, he clicked the safety off of his rifle. Click. So she immediately, just following suit, clicked the safety off of the rifle she was carrying. One of the other, brother-in-law, he did the same thing. He drew his pistol and cocked it, right? And so now they all kind of cluster together and then start backing away from the tree line, while her husband just kind of stood there, and they all moved as a group, backed away. They got out, she said, to the middle of the little open area, which was probably about 150 yards, and half horseshoe shaped. They backed away, and once they got a certain safe distance, his brother, her husband's brother, and her kept watch while he turned around and walked back towards them quickly. They all get into a group and they kind of get low, and they're looking back over to the tree line. Now, as this is going on, the brother and Judy are watching this thing as her husband's coming towards them, start pacing back and forth in the trees, and they're catching glimpses of it as it's moving behind the tree line back and forth. And again, they haven't gotten a full visual, they just got the whoop, right? And so they're all clustered down, and they're, paying attention to that direction. And they're roughly almost dead center in this half horseshoe kind of little meadow with tundra, and there's some black spruce here and there, like little tiny islands of 3 or 4 little trees, and as she said, as they were kind of looking around, everyone was kind of looking around, but her husband was focused on where this thing was showing itself every once in a while. And she said they sat there for 40 minutes or more, and this thing, it would move and then stop, move and then stop. And so they were just kind of like, what do we just move along? What are we going to do? One of the elders said, well, I don't want it to mess with the boat. And the other one said, oh, they're not going to bother the boat. We should just go. Let's go hunt. We'll leave the gut pile for it, right? Everyone's like, well, that sounds good. And so as they were getting ready to leave that meadow and continue on to the trail, because this thing was off to their left and the trail would be off to their right, they weren't going to cross paths with it if they retreated the way they were going to go for the caribou hunt. Now, they were freaked out, but they figured, well, it's out here, let's just go. Because I was like, well, why didn't you guys just get out of there? And because of one of the elders saying, well, they're going to leave us alone, let's just go hunt, we'll leave it a gut pile. And so they just went with that, you know what I mean? And, it was just a whoop, and they hadn't fully seen it, so it was kind of easier to dismiss as just noise in the woods, let's carry on. Now, these are all subsistence hunters, hunter-gatherers, they not easily run off, so to speak, because there wasn't really enough going on to scare them out of there. It was kind of creepy. They heard the noise, but they just, they were going with their best instincts, and so they decided they're just going to continue on and go look for caribou. So Judy's husband keeps guard, and the other one's brother leading the way, 2 elders behind him, and then Judy, and then her husband behind her, all making a straight beeline back across to where the trail continues on over this little, a small mountain, a butte, it basically just a large hill. And on the other side, there was some open tundra and stuff, and that's usually where they come across caribou. Well, everything was fine. No more noises. They hadn't seen it in a minute. So the closer they got to this other tree line that they had to follow through this trail and they make it start going over the butte, once they cleared that and they had some elevation, they turn around and look back. And they don't see anything, but the reason they turned back was they heard a weird noise. And no one could, to some in the group, it sounded like swallows. To others in the group, it sounded like a big robin. So there was conflicting views on what the noise was. And they just dismissed it as, okay, we misheard something, and they continue on. Well, they get up to the apex on top of this butte where the trail led them, right? Which wasn't at the very top, but it was kind of off the shoulder of it. And when they got up there, the elders were a little tired. They said, let's take a break. There was a nice little breeze going, keeping the mosquitoes away. And as they were sitting there talking, Judy's husband was smoking a cigarette and stayed downhill from them on that side they just came from, watching their back trail. Just watching. He kept saying, I got a funny feeling. I got a funny feeling. It's not bad, good, or indifferent. It's just a funny feeling. So I'm just keeping an eye. And so Judy, being concerned, goes down by him and says, what's going on? What's, why you focusing so hard? Well, according to what he shared with her, he said, it told me that if we didn't leave, it was going to kill me. And she was kind of thrown off because he said nothing this whole time. A couple hours had passed, It wasn't just a quick boom, 2 minutes later they're on top of this butte. No, it's not that kind of get down. It's Alaska. You earn that shit. It takes time. So she's going, why didn't you say anything? He goes, it was a weird thought. And according to what she said, it was some mind speak to him, and he wasn't putting 2 and 2 together. He thought it was his own thoughts, And so she leaves him alone about it, and he was like, I don't know if I believe it. I think it was trying to scare me. And she said, well, if you want, we can just let everyone know we're not feeling good. We'll just get out of here. He goes, no, we'll go hunt, and we'll be just fine. They carry on, no movement, no other weird noises. They continue on over the butte. Down on the other side, there's a partial little batch of trees that they're about to cut through, just down at the bottom. And after that, it opens up into the tundra, and then further out is some muskeg, and then you see the rolling hills, and then the trees get thick past that. But in this particular area, she said the woodland caribou would mill around the edges, a lot of the times, and they would be laid down, and they would stand up periodically, walk a little ways, and that's how you spot them, and you get your caribou that way or whatever. So they were just about to cross through this little patch of trees that they had done a bunch of times before. It was a little overgrown, but the game trail was still there. And so her husband led the way, and he was pushing through the brush, kind of pushing it out of the way, clearing the trail because all the branches were intertwined. So he was just kind of pushing them out of the way so the people walking behind had an easier way through. So when they get to the other side, it worked out to where his brother came up beside him and said, hey, did that thing tell you it was going to kill you too? And immediately Judy heard that. She wasn't but a few feet away, and she goes, hey, what do you mean? You heard the same thing. And so that got the elders involved, and they said the same thing. So Judy was the only one that didn't get the mind speak thing from this thing. So unbeknownst to her, this whole time, all 4 of the others in this group heard the same thing: leave before I kill you. But they all, lesson learned now, but they all heard the same thing: leave or I'll kill you. Once everyone spoke up and they were all on the same page, that's when they're like, well, we need to leave, because they all chalked it up to, I'm being paranoid. They individually, they all, it's the damnedest thing when this stuff happens, because Judy was upset. She was like, why didn't someone say something? Why didn't someone say something? You know, and they're like, we're saying it now. We're all safe. You know, let's calm down. Now, that being said, they got to go back. They got to go back over. Well, they decide that Judy's husband would lead, the two elders behind him, the Judy, and then the brother would be the last in line. So, you know, the two youngest able-bodied men were in front and rear, right? And that's what they do. They immediately backtrack. They're going right back the same way they came. They decide once they got down the other side, they would cut wide around. They would take the farthest edge away from where they saw this movement on the opposite side of this meadow, and just skirt the opposite side of it, and then backtrack over to their trail and then get back to the skiff. So when they got to the bottom, that's when they hear some whoops. Now, what was concerning about the whoops was they heard one from the general area where they initially had the sighting. The problem was they heard whoops on the side that they were going to take. And not only that, they heard whoops directly in front of them across this big open meadow, which this big open meadow was about 300 to 400 yards wide and roughly the same in circumference, but it was kind of half horseshoe shaped with the trees and a rolling hill off to the left. And so they decide, well, we'll just cut right down the middle and then cut between the sound of the first whoop and that last whoop straight across, because they were not going to stop. They were going to make their way, and they were armed, and they were leaving the area. And so when they get down to the edge of the meadow and they're just walking out into it with her husband in the lead, the eldest woman started yelling out in Yupik, we're leaving, we're leaving, we're leaving, right? She kept saying that over and over again, every few minutes or, every couple 10, 15 steps, she'd yell it out loud. Kept doing that. Well, about the third or fourth time she's in the process of doing this, they're about halfway through this meadow, and they're starting to cut back across between where they heard the two whoops. They were, splitting the difference. And as they're going along, and she just got done saying it, for however many times, they hear a very sharp, piercing whistle come from that general area of where they saw the movement, right? And immediately they all stopped, because this sharp whistle sounded just, something was weird about it. It's very piercing. It's very loud. She said they all kind of squatted down a little bit, and her husband was kind of looking hard over that way. And out of the blue, from behind them, a rock flew over them, little bigger than a ping pong ball size, but it came almost straight down, so it had to have been thrown at a real high arc, because it came down and bounced, and it caught everyone's attention because it landed in the direction they were all looking, right, in the direction of that sharp whistle. So immediately they all turn around, and they see brown movement directly behind them. They're assuming that's where the rock came from, and they saw this movement in behind the trees, just out of view. They couldn't fully make it out, but they could tell the difference in the color of brown versus the black spruce and stuff that was there. And this thing moved out of view and back into the trees. So now they're like, okay, now they're throwing rocks, sharp whistle, rocks thrown. Let's continue on. So they all stand up and they continue, kind of splitting the difference between the two different sounds that they had heard. Now, once they get closer to the tree line, they hear the sharp whistle again, but now it's immediately off to their right, within 30 yards, they're guessing. It was out of view, but it was right over there. It wasn't far away at all. So immediately they all stop. Firearms are pointed in that direction. Well, behind them, across the meadow, they hear a return whistle, which was a couple octaves lower. It sounded a little deeper in tone. And then they heard breaking and crashing, and this growling started, right? Judy said when the growling started, it was weird, because the growling was really, really low, almost like you couldn't barely hear it, but then it got louder real fast, and then another one chimed in, and they were both kind of in unison with this weird growling, breaking stuff. That sharp whistle noise that they had heard, her husband and his brother were paying attention to that direction while this noise is going on behind them, because they had 3 other people to keep eyes on that. And so from what her husband had said was, the one over here is moving. They're trying to distract us. Come on, let's get moving. Let's get moving. And because of the distance where the growling and the breaking noises were, they didn't feel like it was immediately on top of them, like this whistle was off to their right. So they had the women and, Judy and the 2 elders start the path through, and they were going to make sure, because they're just getting to this tree line, right? So from what Judy said, her husband and his brother kept an eye across the little meadow there, and her husband kept an eye on where the sharp whistle came from, while Judy led the elders through on a little game path, backtracking to where the main trail was that they normally take into this place, right? So they get about half the distance to where the main trail was, and they hear some more whistles and stuff. Now, Judy could only hear the whistles and some commotion of her husband and brother-in-law rushing up their back trail, coming up their back trail real fast. And once they're getting closer and they're in eye distance, they could see, Judy and the elders in front of them. They said, get moving, faster, 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 they're coming. And that's all she needed to hear. She started trotting along and encouraging the elders to hurry up, and the elders were moving along pretty good. So Judy said when they get to the trail, the main trail that they had come down many, many times, this is not a new area to them. They know the area pretty well. They've been in there several times. She said when she got there, she stopped to turn around to make sure that the elders were still there and that her husband and brother-in-law were still coming, to make sure no one got snatched, because she was real scared. Well, as the whole group is there, thank goodness, they all come out onto the trail, and they said, move forward, let's get over to the opening. There was kind of a big opening before the trail continued on the other side. On their trail in, it was kind of like an old marshy spot that kind of dried out or would flood out during runoff and stuff. So there wasn't much to it as far as size. It was maybe 50-yard circle, in amongst these black spruce and stuff. Well, once they got onto the back trail there, they all stopped, and she was asking her husband, what happened? She said they started throwing more rocks, so we need to get moving so, we can get out of here or whatever. As he gets done saying that, they hear another sharp whistle, again, about 30, 40 yards away into the trees, were just out of view where they couldn't see, and more rocks started just kind of randomly raining down here and there. They weren't big rocks. They were small river rocks, probably picked up off the beach or something. She said she had grabbed one for a second and was going to keep it, but she felt like she may be inviting something bad along with it, so she dropped it. But she said it was a smooth river rock. It wasn't like, they were digging it out of the ground or something. And so with the sharp whistle and the rocks raining in, they're motivated. They're going in the same line. Judy first, the elders, then her husband and brother-in-law behind them. When they got clear of that particular tree line, it kind of gradually goes down to a little bit of a creek they got to cross and then make their way back down to the river where the boat's tied off. So they're about not quite 300 yards to where the boat's sitting, and they're making their way. Right, they get into this open area. There's long grass and stuff, but it felt a lot. They felt a lot of relief once they knew the boat was basically in sight. They calmed down a little bit. They're catching their breath, and they all stop. And as they're catching their breath, the husband's looking back up their back trail, and the brother-in-law is off to his left, doing the same thing, but also scouting off to the flanks. Off to the left and the right. Just keeping an eye out. Well, as it's quiet for a minute, like they're all catching their breath, they're calming down, they're trying to, figure out, well, we must have interrupted them hunting or something. They're all having this little discussion about what could have caused any, for this to be happening. Overall, it wasn't a very aggressive type encounter. They just made noises and ushered them along, basically. Let's be honest, they could have taken them out with the rocks. So anyway, they're all calming down and listening, and they're not hearing anything. It's dead quiet. And that's when her husband drops down to one knee real fast, clicks the safety off his rifle and raises his rifle and starts yelling, "Stop, stop, stop." Well, out of their point of view, because they were a little bit lower on the train than her husband, where he was standing just a little bit above them because he was on a little bit of a rise to where the trail cut back, he could see this thing crawling towards them. And so that's why he got down on one knee to treat it like a charging bear, you know. You want to get down on the same level so you're not shooting over the top of a charging bear. Anyway, so, you know, he's doing his thing. He squatted down. He's yelling, "Stop, stop." And this thing, from what her husband said later, was kind of crossing the trail and then crossing back, but progressing towards him. So he fired around up into the trees above it. Boom! And when he did that, all of a sudden you hear just from 3 different areas in front of them, off to the sides and directly in front of them, and where that one was coming towards the husband, you hear 3 running off into the brush. Like immediately, as soon as that gunshot went off, they all went away. They all started going away real fast. They said that the noise these things made leaving was like freight chains, just loud as crap, you know. They said it was very, very, that was more scary than the rocks being thrown, the whistles, because of how powerful it sounded when these things were rushing away. So immediately he racks another round in the chamber, and he's like, he looks back at his brother's looking at him like, holy crap, because there's a lot of noise happening, moving away from them. As soon as it quieted down enough, they all look at each other, and her husband said, go, like, you know, motion, go to the boat, you know, let's go. So they got out of there. I want to thank Judy's niece for reaching out and pointing her in the direction of the channel. I told them that they're welcome to reply in the comments. They wanted to remain anonymous, so I told them if they do respond in the comments, you may dox yourself. So, you know, it's up to you whether you change your mind in the future. Feel free to respond to any comments you want. You know, that's up to you, but you will be compromising your anonymity if you do that. So, but to each his own. I want to thank them sincerely for reaching out and being patient with me with all this background stuff going on to get their experience shared. They dealt with the whoops, the sharp whistles, no owl hoots on this one, which the owl hoots always creep me out because I've heard them. The Delta Clearwater video I have posted on this channel has some audio of that. Creepiest part about that audio is it's the first minute and a couple seconds of that video. 30 seconds is the original, and then the last 30 seconds is the amplified, everything adjusted, the outside noises adjusted out of it. But when the lady responds with her little owl hoots back at these things, when she's done, you can hear off in the distance just whoop, 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 whoop. One of these things got mad that she was mocking him, I guess. I don't know. Again, it's speculation, but that's some creepy stuff. Anyway, thank you, Judy. Thank you for those who made it possible for us to connect. I appreciate that. I'm backed up on encounters, so bear with me. All those people that are waiting for my call, I'll get to you very, very soon. Like I said, I just got back from traveling and dealing with some stuff, background stuff and whatnot. I want to thank Jerry for being part of the 12 tribe panel. We're having discussion on Sasquatch, and you know, everyone voted on whether it was a predator or not, and the only ones who hadn't chimed in yet were the Lakotas, but 11 of the 12 voted that they're predatory. And grant you, not all tribes view it that way, and some tribes have a working relationship from my understanding. I don't know. I was part of it to speak for Alaska and what I've seen in Alaska, and I'm sure I'm sure there may be stories out here in Alaska where these, you know, maybe there's friendly encounters happening, but I haven't heard them outside of that female saving Dan. And even Dan said he felt like they were trying to get rid of the nuisance, you know, the hairless nuisance, because there was search and rescue going looking for him when he was little. But anyway, I want to thank her, Judy, for reaching out, taking the time to talk to me multiple times. I understand it got a little bit annoying, but I wanted to make sure I had everything, you know, chronologically in order and down before I shared it with everyone here. Thanks again for joining me, and we will catch you guys soon.